Shrestha, the college head of Kamalini Institute of Medical Sciences, Telangana. So today we have gathered here to learn about AMC and how to secure a residency position in Australia. We have two esteemed speakers with us. Dr. Naz Sumro has graduated in 2010 from Dow Medical University, Pakistan. And he moved to Australia and did his master's in public health and PhD in the discipline of exercise, health and performance at the University of Sydney. And he passed his AMC in 2017 and is currently working as a resident medical officer in orthopedics at Western Australian Public Hospital. Sir also has a YouTube channel called Outback Doctor Australia, where he posts a lot of information about AMC. And he also runs a mentoring service with the same name to coach international medical graduates to secure a job in Australia. And Dr. Meet Dave has graduated from ONMU, Ukraine in 2015 and has given his AMC 1 in 2018 and passed it. He's currently working in Australia since October 2020. So let's start with the session. Dr. Meet, you can go ahead with your slides.
Sure. So before I start, I'm just going to share my screen so everyone can. Okay. Shrestha, can you please let me share my screen so that I can present those slides?
Yes. Can you present it now, sir?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Okay. Everyone can see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so before I begin, I want to introduce myself. So in 2015, according to Shrestha said, I passed from ONMU, which is in Ukraine, and then went back to India and gave my MCI, which was the exam requiring to work in India. I did my internship over there and did 2 years as a medical officer. I had so many queries when I moved to Australia, and it took me a couple of months to solve those queries. So before I go ahead and jump into pathways, I would like to just make sure that everyone knows different terminology which are being used in India and in Australia. So in India, what happens is once you pass your med school, you go to your internship, and after that, whether or not you decided to go for medical officer that's in private hospital or in government hospital, but you sit for the NEET and go to residency or post-graduation, and then either you become senior resident or consultant. In Australia, it's a bit different. After passing the med school, you go to internship, and then you become resident medical officer, which is usually 2 to 3 years, depending on the specialty you want to go in. And after working as a resident medical officer for 2 to 3 years, you either can step up as a registrar, which is either a service registrar or a trainee registrar, depending on the job you are getting. And after passing those trainee years, you become the advanced trainee in any specialty you have selected. And after those advanced trainee years, you become the consultant. It's like extremely long procedure. I won't say extremely long, but for the international doctors, it's a long procedure to become a consultant if you compare it to India. In India, it usually takes, if you are lucky enough, 5 to 6 years to become a consultant, where in Australia, it takes 7 years to finish your traineeship. So let's go ahead and look into the pathways. So there are 3 pathways through which we can come to Australia and practice. So a standard pathway, which applies to almost 90% of the students, a specialist pathway, which is only for the consultants or whoever has passed their traineeship. And there's also a pathway named competent authority pathway, which is applicable to 5 these countries: US, Canada, UK, Ireland, and New Zealand. So we can completely cross it off if we are sitting in India or other countries, as Shrestha said. So 2 pathways those are applicable to us. And well, almost anyone can go through the standard pathway. Even if you are a consultant, you can go through the standard pathway. It will be a long procedure for you if you are a consultant. But if you are a fresh graduate and finish your internship or doing a medical officership in India, you can go through this pathway. So your basic process will be verifying your degree from ECFMG. That will be your first step. ECFMG, that is Educational Commission for International Medical Graduates. That's a commission which takes all your credentials and verify, and then you can go into different pathways. So if you are planning to go into UK or US or Australia, you must have heard of ECFMG. So there is a part of ECFMG which is called EPIC. It is Electronic Portfolio for International Credentials, through which you can verify your documents, and I will go through the details, but let's see the overview of it first. So first, after verifying your documents, you can open up your AMC portfolio, and once you have sorted that out, you can apply for AMC MCQ CAT. That is step one for the AMC exams, which is an MCQ exam. And after that, according to me, you should sit for the English language exam and pass the English language exam with the scoring which is required. And then you should start doing your job search in Australia. And simultaneously, you should prepare for AMC clinical exam. And once you have get the job, you can apply for the APRA registration. So that's the outline for the standard pathway. Let's go with the ECFMG. So for the prices and just for the clarification, how much does it cost overall? ECFMG charges 130 US dollars just to establish the account. And that $130 includes the ID notarization, which is online. They usually take your passports, usually takes your passport and video call you and notarizes you. They charge 100 US dollars per document, and it is usually just one document, which is your degree. So to sit for AMC MCQ exam, you need your degree or diploma with you. Before that, you cannot give the exam. That differs from USMLE, where you can sit for step one, even if you are studying in your med school. After getting your EPIC documents verified, you can go for AMC portfolio. So you have to establish AMC portfolio, and that charges around 500 Australian dollars. You need EPIC credentials to establish your AMC portfolio. Okay, let's move on to this. So once you already have verified your documents and AMC portfolio, you can sign up for AMC MCQ CAT. I have given the amount which was true till yesterday. So I have updated the slides yesterday, and the prices are till yesterday, but it can change. So AMC MCQ CAT is a computer-based exam, so you don't have to come to Australia for the exam. You can give it from India or anywhere else. There are multiple centers available in India. The exam is 3.5 hours, and there are 150 questions in the exam. And out of those 150, there are 30 questions which are pilot questions. So pilot questions means those questions are not marked. So you have to get those 120 questions. Out of that, you have to at least get 80 questions right to pass, but you don't know that which questions are pilot questions. So you have to finish 150 questions in 3.5 hours. When I was giving the exam, it was mark based. So it was 250 out of 500, but now they only give pass or fail result. To prepare the exam, to prepare for the exam, you at least need 3 months, a proper time of 3 months to prepare. And materials which are used were handbook of AMC MCQ. The other one is question banks, which is I highly recommend AMEDEX. They have all the recalls with them. They charge around 80 US dollars for 1 month of subscription. There's also Canada Q Bank. These two are mostly trusted websites for the question banks. There's also AMEDEX Facebook group where people put down their questions which they had in the exam. But to join the group, you need AMC candidate number. The passing ratio is up to 60%. But as far as I have seen, it's fairly easy exam. I won't say very easy exam, but it's fairly easy exam. And if you have studied for 3 months properly, and if you are lucky enough, you will get lots of recalls in the exam. You can pass it easily. That's the blueprint on the screen for those of you who want to see which category comes in which percentage. I'm gonna go forward in just a second. If you have any questions in between, you can pop the questions in the chat and Shrestha will ask the question. Okay, let's move forward. So after passing the AMC MCQ, I suggest that you should sit for English language exam. So once you have your AMC MCQ and English language, you can apply for the jobs. Um, well, Naj will tell you about how to apply and which position suits better. But I would say that go for English language exam after passing AMC MCQ. There are four exams which are available and which are accepted. IELTS, which is minimum 7 band in each module. PT academics, which is 65 out of 90 in each module. OET, that is only for doctors and nurses, which requires B grade in all modules. And there is TOEFL as well, which is a bit difficult, but yeah, if you want to see that these are the minimum score which are required to pass the exam. Okay, let's move on. So once you have your AMC MCQ and English test, you can apply for the jobs. And if you get the job, you can get your APRA registration done. But there are three types of registration. So before I go and tell you about the clinical exam, I would like to tell you about this APRA registration. So if you have passed your AMC MCQ and English only, you are eligible for the limited registration. On this limited registration, you can work in Australia for 3 years. And after that, either you go through workplace-based assessment or you sit for the AMC clinical exam. If um, if by the time you get your job, you already have given your clinical exam, you are eligible for the provisional registration. So uh, once you have limited registration or the provisional registration, you will have to go through for three main terms which are required to get the general registration here. These three terms are general surgery, general medicine, and ED. So you will have to spend 10 weeks in Gen Surg, 10 weeks in Gen Med, and 12 weeks in ED to get your general registration done. And finally, about AMC clinical exam. So, well, this exam requires very effective communication skills and a good clinical knowledge. Uh, Currently, the exams are on hold. Before that, it was a scenario where you have to give the exam in Melbourne only. But right now, they are trying a new system, which is through Zoom, but they are not sure yet. And as soon as it rolls out, we can tell you about it. The exam itself is 20 station exam. So what happens is once the exam starts, you go through one room. That room is you have to spend 8 minutes in the room, and you have to finish up whatever the task was just outside the room. Out of those 20 stations, there are 16 stations for the clinical exam and 4 rest stations, and you have to pass 10 stations to pass the clinical exam. Till 2019, it was either pass 10 stations and or 8 stations. So if you have passed only 8 stations, you get the retest, but they have stopped retesting after 2019. Well, time to prepare, that depends on each and everyone. I would say from 6 months to a year, but it requires a lot of practice and lots of role playing. Materials, I would say, go for John Mortag, Handbook of Clinical Exam, and recall from the Facebook groups. And success rate is nearly 25 to 30%. So this exam is difficult just because we don't have enough communication skills, and it takes a long time to understand what they require in the examination. Let's go to total expenditure before you can get the job, how much you will have to spend. So in this one, I haven't included any coaching or materials cost. So that depends whether you want to take the coaching or you don't want to take the coaching. Your materials, you are getting it from your friend or anyone, or if you're buying it online from the AMC site. So I have written down over here how much will it cost. Epic will cost you around 350 Australian dollars. Then establishing an AMC portfolio will cost you 500, and the exam itself will cost you around 2700 for part one and 3500 part two. And your first APRA registration will cost you around 1600 to $1800. So it will come up to around 9000 Australian dollars. And um, currently, I'm not counting any visa or ticket charges because the clinical exam, they are going to make it online. So you, of course, can give the exam from sitting in home. Okay, so that's it for my slides. Any questions for me?
That's a very great informative presentation, Dr. Mead.
Thank you.
So if we had to go through a visa, like you don't now at present you are not going there and writing the exam, but when you have to, if there is the COVID situation all settles down and if we have to go, what is the visa that we're supposed to apply for?
So the visa usually it is a tourist visa. So once you book the exam, you will get a letter from the AMC authorities, and with that letter you can apply for the visa.
Oh,
That is subclass 600, which is tourist visa. They usually grants for 3 months. And if you're
okay.
taking any
Somebody has
coaching
also
classes,
asked.
I'm sorry, I'll just finish this. So if you are taking any coaching classes, they will give you a letter for the visa as well. So they will let the authorities know that you're coming here for 6 months of coaching, and after that you'll give the exam. So they will give you the letter for the longer visas.
Okay, somebody has also asked about what questions are they going to ask when you apply for the visa.
They usually don't ask any questions. There, I have not heard anyone to go through interview for the visa.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and about the English exam, which one do you think is a better exam to give?
Well, I have given PTE academics, which was fairly easy. But I would say go for OET as well. OET is fairly easy as well. So PTE and OET I
Mhm.
would suggest. But if you are happy to go with IELTS, you can go for IELTS as well. But I won't recommend anyone TOEFL.
Okay. And someone has asked if you do your undergraduation from India, your residency in USA, then what pathway can they use to apply for fellowships or job in Australia?
So if you already have the registration from USA, but if you haven't got any training pathway yet, so in USA, residency is if you are in the training pathway, so they can apply for competent authority pathway.
Okay, but they have already completed the specialty, right? So can they come through the
Yes.
specialist pathway?
So if they have completed the specialty, they can apply for competent authority pathway.
Okay. Standard pathway is for IMGs who can, and
Yes.
the competent pathway is for the 6 countries you said, or five
Yes.
countries you said, and specialist is for the consultants who are already consultants.
Exactly.
I think we have, a couple of questions in the chat box.
Right.
Uh, should we give English test after first step? I think you already answered that.
So if you pass AMC MCQ, go for the English test, but the English test is only valid for 2 years. So keep that in mind that in those 2 years, whether you wanna hunch for the job or sit down for the AMC clinical, and if you're planning to sit down for AMC clinical before you wanna start applying for the jobs, don't give the English exam first. Give the English exams once you start applying for the jobs.
Okay, and how long for is the AMC one test valid for?
It's valid till, so you won't have to give the exam again. It's valid for the lifetime.
It's valid all the time.
Yes.
Okay. So now if we fail AMC clinical exam, can't we give it again?
I'm sorry, I didn't
Somebody asked
catch
this.
your question.
If we fail AMC clinical exam, can we give
Mm-hmm.
it again?
Yes. So you can give multiple attempts for AMC clinicals. There are no hold after which attempt you can stop. So they allow multiple attempts for the AMC clinical.
Okay. The next question we have is, if we pass MCQ exam and fail in clinical exam, then do we have to give the MCQ exam also again?
No.
You don't have to. How similar is the difficulty level of the first exam compared to USMLE or PLAB?
To be honest, I haven't given USMLE or PLAB, but I was solving USMLE Step 1 exam when I was in med school. It's different exam. I won't say difficult, but because in USMLE Step 1, you are only doing preclinical questions. Well, in AMC MCQ, you are doing all the questions. It doesn't have to be only preclinicals.
Okay. Should we have to clear clinical exam also for getting a job?
As I said, clinical exam is for the getting the provisional registration. Clinical exam is necessary if you can't get into the workplace-based assessment pathway, which is a different pathway, and you have to go through it will take longer time to explain. But AMC clinical is optional to get the job. So I haven't given my AMC clinicals yet, and I'm waiting for the
Okay.
AMC clinicals to reopen again.
Somebody asked about workplace-based assessment also. How does that work? So how long have to do you have to work in the hospital to for the hospital to grade you or like that?
So every hospital does not provide workplace-based assessment in Australia. There are only 6 or 7 hospitals which gives you this opportunity. And just to get into workplace-based assessment, you have to have your limited registration. So once you have your limited registration, you can apply to those hospitals. And if you are successful in getting a job in those hospitals, after 6 months, you can ask them whether you can sit for the WBA program or not. Usually, there is a long queue for the WBA program. When I asked for myself, there were 6 people already queued for 2022, so it's very competitive. But once you have your job done, you can start applying for WBA program.
What is WBA?
That is workplace based assessment. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't get that. And what is the probability of getting a job after clearing AMC MCQ exam?
So it depends. Usually, Naj will go through it in detail, but AMC MCQ does not give you the right to get the job in Australia. To get the job in Australia, you need good clinical exposure. You need good experience as well. So I worked in India for 2 years, and it took me around 18 months to get the job. So it requires good interview skills. It requires a good communication, and it requires a lot of efforts to get the job. Yeah.
Okay.
So AMC MCQ is not the only way. It's not the only sign off you have to do to get the job in Australia.
Okay. Then we have, okay, so somebody has asked, if I pass USMLE step 1 and step 2, after that, can I come to Australia by competence pathway without
No,
doing reference? No, you can't.
no. So
But for PLAB, you can do that, right?
you need to have a college degree from the countries I mentioned. So either undergraduate or postgraduate degree from any countries which I mentioned. So if you have finished your residency in US or UK, you can come to Australia in competent authority pathway. But if you have only passed those exams, no, you can't come under competent authority pathway.
Can they come under the standard pathway? Is I
Yes,
think the
the
same
standard
for
pathway
everyone.
is open for
And
everyone.
what about labs? Lab 1 and 2, if you have passed lab 1 and 2, can you
Shirashta,
come to
I'm
the
gonna
like
cover that bit of it. So maybe you leave these questions to the end because my part of the presentation covers that, so it'll be a bit repetitive.
Okay, so all the questions in the chat box you're going to cover?
Yeah, I can cover that at the end because
The
some of
rest of
them
the questions only.
I will cover it in my presentation anyway.
Okay, so all right.
All right, sure. So I'll see if I'm using my phone as my primary device. So I'll see if I can upload the presentation. Otherwise, I've emailed you, so you may be able to upload it for me and run it through. Yeah. So is the presentation clear over here?
Yes, sir. It is.
All right, perfect. So thank you, Shrestha, for inviting us, and thank you, Meet, for giving the very detailed intro and your experiences in the system, and how you came through the whole hurdles and you were able to successfully work and navigate yourself over here. And first, welcome to everyone who have taken out their time to come and listen to us. So thank you very much for that opportunity. What I will do is I will go through a list of things that I have been asked to present, and I will keep it quite brief so that at the end we have time for further questions and answers. So you can share your questions as we go along. Just type it in the chat box and we will have a look at it at the end. So first of all, before I start, a brief disclaimer. Whatever I'm going to tell you is going to be my personal view. It has nothing to do with either AMC or APRA. This is purely based on what I think about the pathways and what my personal experiences have been. When I use the term IMG, it means International Medical Graduate. And we have already covered standard and non-competent pathways. We may talk about the competent pathway as we go along. This presentation is intended purely for hospital jobs. When we say AMC 1, we mean AMC MCQ. And when we say AMC 2, we mean clinical exams for the AMC. And at any point, Shrestha, if you think my slides are blocking off or you are unable to hear me, just let me know and I can restart again. Please feel free to interrupt me. All right. So my journey, as Shrestha said, is that I initially started off completing my medical degree from Pakistan in 2009. Then I moved to Australia for my master's in public health in 2011. Then I continued to do a PhD in sports medicine. After that, worked for a couple of years as a lecturer teaching medicine at a couple of big universities in Australia. And then in 2017, I finally decided to pass the AMC exam and sit the AMC exam. And after that, I was able to get in the system, initially working as an RMO in Victoria. And then after 1 year over there, I was able to get a work-based assessment job in Western Australia, through which I got the general registration. So basically, a bit of an info on work-based assessment is that if you work in those hospitals for 1 year, you get an exemption from the clinical exam. However, getting the first job in those hospitals as a WBA candidate is difficult. All right, so things to cover today. I will be covering firstly, the differences between PLAB and USMLE and how does it help in entering Australia. I would talk a little bit about how to build a good CV, job opportunities, life as a doctor in Australia, and how to work as a doctor in New Zealand, and about my mentoring services. So first of all, we should understand that there are 3 different pathways. And these pathways are, as described by Dr. Mead, they were a standard pathway, which is also in other words, in layman words, called the non-competent pathway. then we have the competent pathway, and then we have the specialist pathway. So most people coming from India, Pakistan, Southeast Asia come through the standard pathway or non-competent pathway, for which you have to write the AMC 1 exam. And then either you try to get a job in a WBA hospital and work for a certain amount of time to get full registration, or you do the clinical exam at some point and get your general registration, because without the general registration you can't do independent practice or can't get into specialist training. So the question was, is PLAB and USMLE a good idea, and whether PLAB and USMLE help you to get into Australia? So the answer to that is a bit of a yes and a no. PLAB, if you do both PLAB 1 and 2, you have to work in the UK for 1 year, at least a minimum, right? Whether it's any position, it doesn't really need to be a training position. As long as you've completed the PLAB exam and you've completed 1 year in UK, you are eligible to come to Australia without any exams. So when we talk about, these are the competent pathways. So when you talk about competent pathways, they basically mean that you do not need any exams. For USMLE, yeah, it is rather different. So you need to have worked in the US for 2 years, and you have to have passed step 1, 2, and 3. I don't quite understand why somebody working in the US after completing the 3 steps and after working 2 years would come to Australia. But yeah, some people may have their reasons of coming over there. So in my opinion, if I was to recommend something, I would recommend PLAB, because it's only 1 year and gives you an exemption from the clinical exam, which has very low passing ratios. Talking about that, I have linked up the summary from the APRA's website, which can be accessed through this link. So what I will do is I have already shared the slides with Shrestha, and she can share the slides with all the participants if you guys flick through your email addresses. So I made a very detailed video on PLAB versus AMC that can be found on YouTube. It has got like 19,000 views on it. It's a very popular video where I break down step by step how PLAB can assist in getting into the Australian system. So if you haven't seen that, I would recommend you seeing that one. So the important bit about Australian jobs is that there are quite a few cogs in the Australian pathway, and it's important that we understand the whole system and we are aware of what is required from us. So the first, unsure what has happened to my slide over there, but anyway, what I wanted to talk about in that slide is that there are several components to it. So it's not just your AMC exams, it's going to be your experience, your CV, and how you present yourself when you apply for the job. So therefore, having a good CV is important. However, your research experience doesn't really matter in Australia. In the Australian context, the most important thing about your CV is how much experience you have. So if you've got a real solid clinical experience, 2-3 years of clinical experience, then no matter how much research you have done, no matter how much extracurricular activities you have done, that experience outweighs everything else. A couple of important points about the CV. So people who have an Australian permanent residency get an advantage over other candidates. So if you have an Australian permanent residency, put it down, or if you have a substantial visa, make sure you get that on the first page of the CV. On average, for every job in Australia, 40 candidates apply for a single job. So you got to make sure that you impress on your CV on first looks. On average, only 7 seconds are spent on a CV before it's rejected or not looked at in detail. So the important things to capture in your CV are the details of your AMC exams, the details of your English exams, your visa status, and your previous experience. I do tend to put in a professional photo on the CV that just, in my opinion, makes it look a bit more professional. However, you may or may not have the photo on the CV. It's totally your call. So I would not go in too much detail in the CV. I think that's something we can have a whole lengthy session on. It may take a couple of hours because CV building is a totally different ball game. But for the purposes of this talk, as I said, those were the important things that you need to be aware of. All right. So what have we covered so far? We have covered Lab and USMLE in entering in Australia. And then we've talked about the components of a good CV. Now let's talk about the job opportunities. So in Australia, in general, the main jobs that you will get are postgraduate year 2, postgraduate year 3 jobs, which are also called the resident medical officer jobs. Senior jobs such as registrars you can get, but those for those you generally tend to require about 4 or 5 years of local experience in your own country. So if you have under 5 years of experience, then ideally the first job you would get is going to be an RMO job. So over here, I'm going to talk about 4, 5, 6 lessons actually, which are important to know when you are applying for jobs. So it's important to apply for the right job. So if you don't have enough experience, then you are never going to get a registrar job. But if you have a lot of experience, 4 or 5 years of experience, then it's prudent to apply for a registrar job. Otherwise, as a junior doctor, you apply for a resident medical officer or an RMO job. Lesson number 2. I'm not sure why it's writing as lesson 1, but that's fine. So lesson number 2, or a continuation of lesson 1, is knowing your terminology. So in Australia, there are different terminologies for different jobs. So as I explained, you need to know what is the best way of applying for jobs and which jobs you're eligible to apply. So if the job says that eligible for limited or provisional registration, and the job says PGY2 or postgraduate year 3 jobs, those would be the most easier jobs to get. The next lesson is that you do not need to pass AMC2 to work in Australia. So a lot of people fall in the trap of passing the AMC2 exam before applying for jobs. But when you apply for jobs, you actually don't need AMC2. So if you do AMC1, you're eligible to apply and work in Australia under limited registration. And normally the board allows you up to 3 years of extension of limited registration till you complete your AMC2. So you can possibly work in Australia for another 3 years without doing the AMC2 or the clinical exam. Lesson 3 is recency of practice. So again, a lot of people, whilst they are doing the exam, they stop working as a doctor. As soon as you have got a gap of more than 12 months working as a doctor, then it is considered that you are not, you do not have recency of practice, and that is a biggest hurdle in getting jobs. So if a candidate has recent experience and only passed AMC1, and compared with the next candidate who has passed both the AMC 1 and 2, but does not have recent experience, then candidate 1 will get the priority in terms of getting the job. So lesson 4 is to make sure that you apply for the applications at the right time. So start of the year and end of the year are good times to apply in Australia. You need to have good references. If you have referees or professors or head of departments and can respond back, then that's really good. If you can apply for observerships in Australia. If you have an Australian visa and you're residing over here or have opportunity to come over here, make sure you try to apply for observership programs. Very difficult to get, but if you keep trying, you may get lucky. Emergency medicine, or ED, emergency department as we call it in Australia, have the most number of jobs. So if you gain relevant experience in ED, then your application chances are very, very high. And as I said, start of the year and end of the year are really good time points to apply for jobs. Lesson 5 is doing legwork. So what I mean by that is that to get a job in Australia, it is quite competitive. So you need to put in some extra effort, which basically means emailing the hospitals, calling the hospitals, um, trying to find out people who understand the system, trying to find out people who can help you get introduced to the hospital, trying to find people who are able to make you understand where opportunities are abundant and what way you need to communicate, putting in a lot of effort on your CV, cover letter, selection criteria, and these sort of things will help you get into the market a little bit easily. And again, lesson 6 is who to contact. So when you are after a job, you need to make sure you contact the medical workforce manager, the emergency department director, the director of medical services, send them emails, contact them repeatedly, and then when the opportunity arises, you're at the right place at the right time. So there were a couple of other things that I needed to cover. I will just go back to the questions that I had to cover, so to make sure that the things are clear. So yes, so we spoke about the job opportunities. So I have already told you about the different job opportunities. Now, life as a doctor in Australia. I have made a detailed video on my experiences in Australia. So make sure you go on my channel, Out by Dr. Australia, and have a look at it. So there we have videos on what sort of car I drive, what are my monthly income. Life in Australia in general is really good. It's a really nice place to live in, and I will highly recommend it. In terms of salaries, a junior doctor can make between $6,000 to $8,000 a month. So if you've finished medical school, you've got a couple of years of experience, your first job will get you between $6,000 to $8,000, and your salary only goes up from there. How to work as a doctor in New Zealand was another question. So I have actually not worked in New Zealand, but if you have registration in Australia, you can go and work in New Zealand without doing any exams, and it's quite easy to get a job. New Zealand does have their own testing exam, which is called the NESREX. I have never given that exam, and from what I hear, it's not too dissimilar to the Australian exam, but getting the availability and dates for it is quite challenging. So therefore, most people end up doing AMC anyway. All right, so the final one is about my mentoring services. So I do run mentoring services for international doctors. I do run my own company, Outback Doctor Australia. You can email me at outbackdraustralia@gmail.com or visit my website, outbackdraustralia.com.au. My website is under development, so some updated information will be there in the next few weeks. Or visit my blog post on successfulaustralian.blogspot.com. I will make these slides available, so if you are interested, you can get a copy of these slides, or email me or Shrestha to get a copy of these slides. So that's it from my end.
That was very informative, sir. Thank you. So what about, are you ready to take questions, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go to the questions.
So how do you apply for residency after you get your job and after you basically complete your clinical exam?
Yeah, so residency, so we need to clarify what is residency. So what do you understand by residency?
Residency as in specialty, your PG training?
Yeah, correct. So
training.
Yeah, okay, postgraduate training. So in Australia, residency does not mean postgraduate training. In fact, residency is basically a resident medical officer job that is generally a non-trainee job. In Australia, a residency starts when you are a registrar, and registrar jobs are most of the time residency or training jobs. To get a registrar position in Australia, you generally need at least 2 years of Australian experience. I have made a detailed video on how to do PG training in Australia. So for those of you who are interested on how to get detailed scope on training positions in Australia and how to train, please make sure you watch that video on my channel. But as I said, you cannot directly do a residency in Australia. You will need to work at least for a couple of years till you get your general registration and then apply for residency positions.
Yes, and what are the easiest and the toughest residencies to get in? Is it easy to get into surgical specialties for IMDs?
Yeah, surgical specialty is the most challenging residency to get in. You can get in. So first of all, no training position in Australia is exempt to IMGs. So all the IMGs can apply for all the training position, and they can get into any training position they like. For surgical specialties and surgical and orthopedics and ENT sort of positions, it's very similar all around the world. You need to show your competence, and that only comes with experience. So you generally tend to need about 4 to 5 years of Australian experience and good Australian referees to apply for the program. The easiest ones to get into are psychiatry and emergency medicine.
Okay, then how long will the training period be?
All right, again, that varies. So most training periods are between 4 to 6 years.
4 to 6 years. Okay. So some of them have asked about rural service bond. Is something about rural service bond?
Correct. So the bond is in Australia is called as moratoria. That is only if you are working as a GP. So if you want to work as a general practitioner in Australia, then you have a 10-year rural bond. So you have to spend 10 years in rural Australia.
Or if you want to work as a GP, you're supposed to work in the rural areas for 10 years.
Correct.
Okay. Then we have, let's take the questions in the chat box.
Sure. If you are able to read the questions, then I can answer them. And then maybe we can alternate between myself and Meet. So one question I can answer, one other one Meet can answer.
Yes, sir. Yes. Dr. Meet, could you please come live? The first question we have here is, what exactly is the job hunt?
So job hunt, I'll tell you about it because I'm very new to it. Well, job hunt is once you pass your AMC MCQ and your English exam, you start applying for the jobs. In India and other countries, I'm not very familiar, but in India, it was very easy. You just have to show up and you get the job. But in Australia, it's very competitive. You are being an outsider. They will check you everything. They will check from your CV to how you present yourself, to how you are good at your clinical skills, to how your referees think of you. So everything combined, it's called job hunt. And just to show up yourself and just to get an interview, you have to keep calling them and you have to keep emailing them, going to the hospital again and again. As Dr. Nath said, you have to give the legwork. It's nearly impossible to just sit at home, apply for the job online and get the job. You have to make efforts about it. So that is job hunt. So getting a job is also a job.
Okay. So the next question, Dr. Nath, she told us about the clinical experience in Australia is very important. And you also mentioned if you can do any clerkships or electives in Australia, that would be good. So how do you go about it? How to apply for clerkships in Australia?
Yeah, it's a bit of a challenge in Australia. So very few hospitals give clerkships, or in Australia, it's actually known as observerships. Yeah, it's a bit of a challenge. The only way to figure it out is basically individually emailing hospitals and individually emailing directors of clinical training and directors of their departments to ask for observership. The problem with the observership is that A, it's unpaid. B, you need to know someone to get it. So if you know someone in the hospital, it's easiest way of approaching the directors like that. So that's the number one. There are a few hospitals that do give paid observership. So I know that a few hospitals in Melbourne, such as Western Health and Northern Health, they offer it. And a few hospitals in Tasmania, like the Royal Prince Alfred, Royal Hobart Hospital, they offer it as well. But again, it varies every year. Some hospitals will offer it, some hospitals won't. So it's a bit difficult. But what is in your control is that you can always get more experience in your own country. So I always recommend at least get about 2 years of experience before coming to Australia.
Okay, so if we do get a observership in Australia, does it have to be in the specialty that we are interested in?
It does help to have an observership in an area where you're interested in, because then that will increase the chances of getting a job in that area. But it's not necessary.
Okay, then we have, how long does it take to get a residency position via AMC from the day of giving AMC 1?
It depends. As Naj said, it's not only your AMC examination which gives you the job. So it works as a cogwheel, as Naj said. You need your experience in lots of other things and lots of work and lots of pleasing of other people just to get the job. So how good you are at doing those things, it depends on that.
And just to add to that, I have, as I referred, I've already got a detailed video on how to get PG training in Australia. So please refer to that one on YouTube, on my channel, and that will elaborate on what Peter said.
Yes, and the next question is, I took TOEFL in school and got a qualifying score. So what I want to ask is, do I need to take it again? So basically asking, what's the validity of TOEFL exam?
I don't think TOEFL is accepted in Australia.
How many years?
What do you think, Meet?
Well, I read about it, but I have never met anyone who has given TOEFL, so I'm not very familiar with it. But as far as I know, all the English language exam has the expiry date, and those are only like 2 years.
Yeah.
So we also have a question about which one to take. Dr. Meet has already answered that. I think you said OET and PTE, right, sir?
Yes.
Which English exam is easier? Okay. And if
Yeah,
you have the next question,
I've got a video on my channel describing the 3 exams: OET versus PTE versus IELTS. So if you are confused, make sure you watch that video. It will clarify everything.
Yes. Okay. The next question we have is, if we have limited registration and we apply for workplace-based assessment, is it simpler than AMC clinical and a better option?
I probably will answer this one. Yes and no. Yes, in a way that you just have to do your job for 1 year. You have to do a few assessments, and you should be done. So it's easier in that way, but it's lengthier. It's lengthier because you have to work in that hospital for 1 year. If you do the AMC clinical exam, it's only a 1-day exam, so you can prepare for 3 to 6 months or 3 months. Some people are very good at their clinicals, so you can do the exam and you're done in 1 day, rather than going through a prolonged process of pleasing the hospital for the whole year. So it depends on what you want to do. I personally didn't want to do the exam, so I got the WBA position. I think Meet is going to do the clinical exam. Would you, Meet?
So I'm just waiting for the clinical exam to reopen. And as Nad said, you have to please the hospital for a year. Well, I got the job in October and I changed the hospital already. I'm going to Canberra next week. I got the job in Canberra hospital. So yeah, I'm going to Canberra next week. So it's easier if you want to switch the hospitals. You won't have to stick to a hospital.
Okay. So we have a question, another question. I've cleared AMC clinical and applied for jobs in Australia. I can't get it with some click and all practice years in India. I have to work in India for a few years before I can land a job. Okay. Basically, the question says, should I work in India for a few years before I can land a job in Australia?
Definitely. So the longer you wait and sit at home applying for the jobs, so after a year, it gets difficult. It's get more and more difficult. So if you can work in the hospital in India, and that makes your gap year like shortens, so you won't have any gap year. It's a good thing to start working in India.
Okay, the next question we have is post-graduation training from Australia recognized in US, UK, or Canada? Can I work directly in these countries after passing out without any exams?
Short answer is yes.
You can. Okay, without any exams.
Yeah.
Great. We also put up a Google form in the group, in the WhatsApp group, and people sent in their questions. So I'll ask you those questions now. What made you choose Australia over the other countries like US, UK, Canada, despite the low passing rates and expensive exams?
The question for me, if the question is for me, well, I came to Australia because my wife is Australian. So she came to Australia in 2012, and she's been here for the past 8 years. That's why I'm in Australia.
And the answer for me is that if I knew before, I would have gone to the UK and come through the PLAB and the competent pathway system. It's a lot easier coming from there.
Okay.
But I didn't know. I didn't have a session like this when I was coming.
That's a good answer. So what are the alternative exams to write to get through to Australia other than AMT?
Already covered that. So the PLAB one is the best one. Watch the video.
Yeah. And is there a way to come to Australia without writing PLAB or AMC? You also
No.
got this question. No. Yeah.
Then... I'm going to keep the answers short, all right? So we can go through more questions.
Okay. Yes. And how about PR? How do we get PR in Australia?
Meet. 5-second answer from you.
Multiple ways. You should visit a agent for it. There are lots of ways to get a PR in Australia.
Yeah, and the short answer, you need to get general registration first to apply. So
yes.
First get a job, get general registration, then you're gonna apply for PR.
Okay, after general registration, a little about the process of getting PR.
Essentially, it's an online system, so you just put in your application form, and they run rounds every month, and you may have to wait for between 6 to 12 months, and you get a PR. It's quite easy. It's not a difficult thing.
Okay. Are there any costs included to get the PR? Does the application cost anything?
The application is free, but if you are invited to get the PR, I think it's about $6,000.
$6,000. Okay. Yes, I think we've covered most of the questions that we got through the Google form. So we have another question in the chat box. So if I cleared my AMC 1 English exam and registration and ready to apply, my question was, will I not land a job in Australia because I don't have working experience in India? Yeah, she basically did everything, but she doesn't have working experience in India. So can I still land a job?
It's hard.
This was answered.
So if you have done your internship, you still have a small chance, but it's hard. If you don't have any sort of visa and if you're here on tourist visa, it's really, really hard.
I agree.
And the other question we have, yes. Okay, the other question we had was, do I need to do internship in Australia again after doing internship in India?
No.
Okay, any more questions, guys? Please put them in the chat box.
So sure, if there are no questions, then we'll make a move. But please share my email address with the guys, and I'm happy to field any more questions on the email.
Yes, I'm just sharing it.
Now we'll just take. I think we'll take last 3 questions, and then we will call it.
Yeah, exactly.
How does that sound?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yes, we have a few more questions.
So make it last 3, all right?
This is, yes. Does short internships during med school help?
Wait.
What's a short internship actually? You either do a full 1 year internship. So I guess those are your rotations and it doesn't count as far as you have finished your med school.
Okay. So this is a question to maybe ask an agent, but if my blood relative has a PR or my spouse does that, or my spouse does that automatically qualify me for a PR without experience in India?
So PR
No.
and getting a job is a different thing. Don't mix
Yeah,
up.
agree.
Okay. And FLAB, USMLE, AMC, which one is better? They have already answered this, I think.
Yeah, watch the video.
All right, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to join with you all guys. And it was amazing, Naj, again. I guess we'll catch up soon.